What's up, fellow travelers? Just over a 2-hour motorbike ride southeast of Hanoi, we have the city of Hai Phong, the third largest city in Vietnam, but it isn't a hub of international tourism, so most people know very little about it outside Vietnam. But it's a pretty big deal. It's a place where military strategy, agricultural productivity, and maritime commerce have come together for over 1,000 years. Now, it's a place for Hanoians to breathe sea air and eat fresh seafood on the weekends. But it's also a lot more than that. So, today, let's go to Hai Phong. So, when we look at the name, we can break it into two parts. Hai comes from the Sino-Vietnamese word Hai, meaning the sea, or ocean. We had for years assumed that Phong was the same Phong like Phong to bed, kitchen, or Phong Wu, like bedroom. Assumedly, a king or an emperor had a place out on the coast and called it their sea house or something like that, but it's not. Phong actually comes from this Sino-Vietnamese word phang, which is a verb for to defend. So the name for Hai Phong is actually better translated as defense from the sea or sea defenses. As all the land between here and Hanoi is agriculturally rich farmland, this strip of land has always been the population and economic heartland of Vietnam, particularly before the expansion of various empires southward. Let's look at some sexy statistics. Everybody likes that, never boring. While most people see Da Nang as the third city of Vietnam, mostly because of the tourism appeal, and it just aesthetically fits, having one big city in the north and one big city in the south, then the third one in the middle. But Hai Phong is actually the third most populous city in the country at somewhere around 2 million people, compared to Da Nang's 1.3 million. Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, Can Tho, which is just south of it, Da Nang, and of course Hai Phong, are all self-administered regions, meaning that they have their own administrative autonomy and govern themselves like their own provinces. With an area of 1,500 square kilometers of productive farmland, heavy industry, and both advanced and mass production factories, Hai Phong is a central part to understanding Vietnam from economic, military, and historical points of view. While the Red River itself that Hanoi sits on empties a couple hundred kilometers south of here near Nam Ding, Hai Phong actually sits on the Cam River, which as soon as it's made it through the city, it meets with the Bac Dang River, which is very important, and we'll get back to it specifically a little later. While there are numerous rivers that run throughout the delta, there have been enough canals cut over the millennia that it's actually possible to ship goods from Hanoi to Hai Phong and vice versa. This will also be important later. Vietnam is a significant rice exporter. In 2025, the country exported almost 8 million metric tons of rice around the world. There are two big agricultural basins, one in the south and one in the north, with almost everything produced in the north that is shipped globally coming out of here. There has been wet rice agricultural production going on in the Delta for at least the last 3,000 years. And this agrarian lifestyle was the hallmark of the lived experience for 99.99 whatever % of the people in the region, all the way up until the beginning of proletarianization under the French Empire and the ever-increasing industrialization under the modern government, after being freed from sanctions, of course. The agricultural surplus that the area produces and exports from here have been one of the dominant driving factors that have funded colonial extraction as well as the revolutionary resistance movements to it. The populations of the area were both the labor and the fighters of each. The canals that crisscross the rivers of the region serve multiple functions. They allow for the shipping of commodities, sure, but they also act as irrigation canals for the rice farms and allow for military logistics. If we look at some traditional art, just search for Dong Ho, and you'll be greeted by plump, healthy, idealized memorializations of village life. Fat babies with chickens, fat babies with ducks, fat babies with fish, fat babies with a prawn, fat babies with goats, fat babies with really big frogs, Plump mummies feeding fat, happy babies a full pig, fat babies and friends, and of course, playing a flute or flying a kite from the back of your water buffalo. These paint a very idealized, very rose-tinted version of village life, echoing the quote from Uncle Ho that every family should have a garden, a fish pond, and a pig, which is essentially a Wohnautung, a common cyclical gardening technique. Anyway, these images are very much aspirational to a before times that didn't really exist. All cultures around the world do this to varying extents in varying contexts, whether it's Westerners who think back a few generations to the quaint family farm in the French or German or whatever countryside with fat cows and lots of bread and cheese. Chinese historical dramas set during the imperial eras, or people in Thailand thinking back on happy elephants and heaping harvests. It's why conservatism is a thing. People don't tend to look realistically back into history if they don't have to. A little over 2,000 years ago, the Earth Nation attacked. Northern Vietnam was given the name Giao Chi in Vietnamese and Diao Zhi in Chinese. And let's just say, right off the bat, people weren't down with it. By the year 40, the Chung Sisters Rebellion had kicked off, one of the most famous events in Vietnamese history. The general Lê Chen established a town called An Bien in an area then known as Hai Phong Tu. While the name would change over the millennia, the Hai and Phong stayed, and the modern city has a district named after Lê Chen herself. She recruited people from the villages around the area and was a significant force against the colonizers. The nearby Bac Dang River was home to both of the most significant naval battles in Vietnamese history. In 938, Ngo Nguyen and his navy retreated up the river and installed long iron-tipped spears in the riverbed behind them. The chasing Chinese fleet impaled their ships on them and sank. Then, almost exactly 350 years later, General Chen Hung Dao laid the exact same trap in 1288 to beat the Mongol navy. Due to all this, Hai Phong in general, but the Bac Dang River in particular, are kind of hallowed ground in Vietnamese military history. So let's set the scene. The year is 1945. An eventful year. The Americans have just been dropping nukes to wave their dicks at the Soviets. The Viet Minh have seized power and declared the Democratic Republic of Vietnam as an independent state in September 1945. As France gets its act back together, they send troops back into the north. A treaty is signed between France and Vietnam on the 6th of March 1946, recognizing Vietnam as a free state within a new French Union. It was all very shaky. On the 20th of November that same year, there boiled up a dispute over which forces, Vietnamese or French, had the rights to do customs inspections in Vietnam. French soldiers attempted to confiscate gasoline from a Chinese boat, but Vietnamese police intervened. This led to a shootout. The French general Jean Vallouis said something, sources have different quotes, but essentially, take all the biggest guns and make them regret thinking they were ever free. They proceeded to fire artillery from their ships into the city. As can be seen by modern colonial wars, the aggressors tend to stand as far away as possible and blow up women and children, hospitals, and schools. The French army claimed a laughably low amount, 300 people, had died in the assault. Early Vietnamese estimates were around 20,000. Modern analysis generally sits at around 6,000 civilians dead. The Vietnamese obviously refer to this as Tam Sát Hai Phong, the Hai Phong massacre, as it should be. In English, it's often referred to as the Hai Phong incident, and even some French, hilariously parroted by the US Naval Institute, call it the Hai Phong misunderstanding. In all the history of horrible that is the French Empire, this was one of, if not the single worst of their atrocities. One of the most ironic parts of this all is that in the beginning of 1946, the provisional government of France was headed by this guy, Félix Goyen, an apparent socialist, and when the massacre happened, the largest party in the French National Assembly was the Parti Communiste Français, showing once again that Western Marxism was never a thing to be taken seriously. When the Geneva Accords were signed in July 1954, most localities in the north were liberated. The French, however, didn't want to follow the agreement and spent almost a year, over 300 days, bitching, moaning, and dragging their feet before leaving Hai Phong. On May 13, 1955, the People's Army of Vietnam finally marched into the city. 2 days later, the final French forces retreated from their positions in Do Son. May 13th remains the day celebrated as Liberation Day of the city. This is also when it was decided that the Hai Phong tree, the Royal Poinciana, or the Flamboyant tree in English, was determined to be the symbol of Hai Phong, because its blooming season coincides with Liberation Day and the obvious connection to the color red. Ironically, the tree was first imported to Vietnam from France over 100 years before. When imperialism switched from baguettes into burgers, Hai Phong was once again a frontline target. While Vietnam had rail connections to China, long strips of metal are particularly easy to take out by an air force. Since Hai Phong is the only major port city in northern Vietnam, it was essential for Vietnam to get aid and resources from its allies. Obviously not wanting this, the Americans filled the harbor by having naval planes drop mines across Hai Phong Harbor in May 1972. The harbor was essentially sealed off until the mines were cleared after the Paris Peace Accords were signed in 1973. The shipyards and the industrial section of the city were completely wiped out. Rail lines, even just back to Hanoi, were disrupted, and thousands upon thousands of homes were destroyed. Luckily, the Vietnamese side was very strategic, smuggling out machinery from the factories that would later be returned to function even in the destroyed structures of what used to be their factories. The area traded with other regional actors since forever, but Hai Phong became the economic driver that it is today, starting in the French period. Understanding the geographical value of the city, the French made it its own territory, and cutting it off from the rest of the country a la divide and conquer. They set up the first shipbuilding yards, started cement production, glass manufacturing, a porcelain workshop, and textile manufacturing, all of which would be expanded on once independence was achieved. Now, this is definitely the coolest thing that we learned while researching for this episode. It was really difficult finding sources to read about this in English, so much of the research was done in Vietnamese. The head research intern is a fat white guy, and I'm a dog, so if there are any mistakes, please correct us in the comments. In 1961, Vietnam launched the Four Great Movements era. These were Giao Đại Phong, the Great Phong Wind, which focused on agriculture; Trong Bạc Li, the Bạc Li Drum that focused on education; Cơ Bản Nhát, the Three Firsts flag for the military; and Song Duyên Hai, the Coastal Wave that focused on industrial capacity and output. We'll get back to the other ones in a bit. Song Duyên Hai was principally based out of the Duyên Hai mechanical factory in Hai Phong, which still operates to this day, by the way. The factory launched a technical sports festival, Hội Thao Kỹ thuật, that was a shift to focus on innovation and the rationalization of production. Within just 2 months, the workers passed over 200 labor targets. Productivity is reported to have gone up 600%. And the festival was designed very specifically to transfer knowledge and skills over from the veteran workers to the newer generations of workers. Apprentices and support staff were all included at every level. I kind of hate to make the comparison, but this was the Ford factory moment. Standardization was established at Duyên Hai and sent out to the rest of the country. The factory went from repairing old French ships to producing their own fishing trawlers and dredging ships. For those who don't know, a dredging ship is the kind of ship that removes debris, sediment, sand, etc. from the bottom of waterways so bigger ships can pass through. Lathes and other factory equipment were redesigned to run even better on locally produced materials. This is where the first indigenously produced engine blocks were cast. They would go on to pioneer the pumping equipment that would help with the agricultural efforts of the Great Phong Wind. The engine block development and shipbuilding techniques were a huge boost to the People's Navy. The Zhuanhai Mechanical Factory was the turning point from classical production into modern precision engineering in the country on a broad scale. The city also has an incredibly interesting diasporic history, with ethnically Chinese, called Hua in Vietnamese, having lived here for centuries, doing mercantilism long before the French arrived. When the French did show up, they did the classic colonial strategy of divide and conquer, choosing to prioritize these Hua business communities, playing into the whole culture war, not class war that's a tale as old as time. This only increased during the Chinese Revolution as reactionaries and the merchant class of China sought preferable conditions for their businesses in territories of a European imperial power. What we found most interesting, though, was the Korean diaspora and how it's changed over time. In the early 1900s, Japan was colonizing the Korean peninsula and northern China. According to a couple of different sources, Hai Phong was popular in Korean media at the time for the dynamism of the place, showing that the dynamism of corporate speak isn't that dynamic. Anyway. By 1910, the Korean peninsula had officially been annexed by Imperial Japan, which would go on until 1945, the same year that North Vietnam got independence, but that connection's for another time. The historic use of Chinese characters academically on both the Korean peninsula and in Vietnam meant that the circulation of Chinese newspapers, translation networks, and anti-colonial resistance networks were accessible with a little study from peoples of both of these places. Now, let's pause and look north to a much more well-known city, Shanghai. In 1919, 9 years into the annexation, two potential governments for Korea started to establish themselves. China, while never fully colonized, had many sections that had been given up in what would later go on to be called a process of appeasement. Giving land away, hoping that the aggressors would settle for what was given, and not demand more. In hindsight, this was always a pretty terrible call, whether in Shanghai or Czechoslovakia. As for Shanghai, there was a segment of the city that had had control ceded to the British. This was called the International Settlement, north of the Suzhou River. The American sector was also located in this concession. There was also a French quarter to Shanghai. Now, saying it's complicated is a comically simplified way of explaining basically any point in history, especially Chinese history, and especially in regards to the period around 1919. But let's give the most simplified rundown for context. The Xinhai Revolution overthrew the Qing dynasty in 1912. Establishing the Republic of China Beiyang government, which would technically last until 1928. However, they didn't really hold control over much of the country, with most of the land outside of the big cities being held by regional warlords, including the Kuomintang, generally known in English as the Kuomintang, until the establishment of the People's Republic in 1949. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves. As of 1919, Japan was allied with the Western empires and would remain so until World War II, when they switched sides and after losing were subsumed by the Americans. By this time, both the Chinese and Korean Communist parties were still babies. And while Kim Il-sung, 7 years old at the time, was also moved into China to escape the Japanese with his family, in the French quarter of occupied Shanghai, Korean anti-colonial elites established the Provisional Government of the Republic of Korea. This would move between different Chinese cities over the course of the World Wars before finally settling in Chongqing in 1945, then going back to Korea. The reason that we bring up all of this complexity in Northeast Asia in a video about a city in Vietnam was that the rail lines between northern Vietnam and southern China allowed Korean dissidents on both sides to legally book tickets on Japanese-controlled travel providers from the Korean peninsula to Hai Phong, which was under French control, as Japan and France were not at war at this time. They could then easily make it north to places like Chongqing, where they could meet up with comrades, train, and be educated before returning to the struggle for independence in Korea. This became even more important once Kim Il-sung entered the scene, and the revolutionaries received extensive training at the Yunnan Military Academy in Kunming, Yunnan, relatively easy to reach from northern Vietnam. By 2026, the Republic of Korea is far and away the single largest source of foreign direct investment in the city, with registered capital being over $15 billion in this city alone, and hundreds of separate projects. In the last couple of decades, this has transformed Hai Phong into a major global supplier of electronics and appliances. There are also a number of formal Korean institutions throughout the city promoting economic co-development, such as the Korean Resident Association, the Korean Chamber of Commerce, KOCHAM, and it even has its own chapter of the Vietnam-Korea Friendship Association that's headed by the city's vice chairman of the city's People's Committee. The closeness of ties can actually be seen in another interesting way. In most other Vietnamese cities, Vietnamese is taught natively, of course, English as a mandatory second language, then, depending on the city, the third language that students choose to learn alternates between Chinese and Japanese. In Hai Phong, however, both of these are surpassed by Korean, having citywide Korean language competitions and various Korean language centers. It should be noted here that Vietnam still retains good diplomatic relations with the DPRK. Students from the north still study at schools in Hanoi, and it was chosen as the place for the meeting between the Americans and the DPRK a few years ago. This isn't relevant to Hai Phong though, we just thought we'd mention it for the sake of continuity. At the end of the weekly business cycle, a great migration begins. From the law offices of Ba Ding and the tech campuses of Kozai, they come. They mount their black SUVs and German sedans and descend onto the flock awaiting them upon the seaside. They merge onto the Hanoi-Hai Phong Expressway and they journey east. By Friday evening, they have arrived in Hai Phong. By Sunday afternoon, they will be gone, sunburned, hungover, and strangely evasive about where they have been all weekend. This is not tourism in the conventional sense. The pagodas remain unvisited. The museums go unentered. The colonial architecture is admired only as a backdrop for selfies. Something else on the wind has drawn the males of Hanoi to the port city with such gravitational regularity. There are 3 imperatives that draw them here beyond the search for an interim mate. The fresh seafood, known to keep them virile and vigorous. Hanoi is a freshwater city, providing a diet of river fish, pond-raised carp, and the occasional eel. Hanoians eat well, but they eat inland. Hai Phong is where the Cam River meets the Gulf of Tonkin. The seafood is abundant, varied, and fresh in a way that Hanoi's refrigerated supply chains simply cannot replicate. Seafood restaurants that line Chan Hung Dao Street and the district of Do Sun exist purely for the purpose of hosting these migratory weekend visitors. The menu has been established over countless visits from years gone by. Mantis shrimp steamed with lemongrass, crabs the size of dinner plates, and clams in tamarind broth. The Hanoian man orders seafood in Hai Phong the way that he orders nothing in Hanoi. Expansively, competitively, as if the crab on the table correlates to his professional status. The same corporate lackey that orders a bowl of pho on a Tuesday will preside over a feasting table, heavy with the weight of the ocean's crustaceans come Saturday. The bill will be paid in cash. The receipt will be lost. To facilitate the digestion of such marine luxuries, it has long been understood the necessity of beer. the Bia Hai Phong flows with generosity, giving them a sense of home in this faraway place as the memories of Bia Hoi rush back to them. The toasts are frequent, loud, and mandatory. The structure has been ritualized over the years. The first round is proposed by the most senior man present. Everyone drinks. The second, by the host, a Hai Phong local, a business contact, or old chap from university. The third, by the most junior man of the migration present, who must demonstrate appropriate deference while simultaneously proving that he can keep pace with his more experienced compatriots. Everyone drinks. The fourth through infinite rounds are proposed by anyone with the wits still about them to remember that they have not yet proposed a round. Everyone drinks. By the time the crabs are reduced to scattered shell fragments strewn across the table and floor, the table has accumulated an incalculable number of empty bottles. It can be seen that the average Hanoian male consumes approximately 3 times his usual weekly alcohol intake on a single Hai Phong Saturday. As the seafood begins to settle in their bellies, the beer will continue to flow, but a change in venue is required. Karaoke in Hai Phong is not the public affair alongside the mechanical bull of the Western yokel. It's conducted in private rooms, windowless, soundproofed, deliberately anonymous. Decor ranges from the luxurious hotel lobby to what a 90s Japanese businessman imagined the future to look like. Leather sofas, disco balls, television screens more akin to small cinemas. Power ballads dominate, songs about lost love, about the sea and mountains, the motherland, and about returning home, delivered with theatrical anguish by men who have not yet returned home and have no intention to for several more hours. There is a specific genre favored by the migratory Hanoian man, the duet. This, of course, requires a female vocal partner. It can be observed from the female companions of the karaoke establishments are notably younger than their duet counterparts, notably more attractively dressed, and notably absent during the seafood and beer phase of the ritual. They seem to materialize specifically for the vocal portion. Now, joking aside, this relationship is certainly not special to Hanoi and Hai Phong. Most major population centers have one. Bangkok and Pattaya, Singapore to Batam, London and Brighton, Tokyo to Atami, etc. Hotels that don't ask questions, restaurants with private rooms, karaoke places with discreet entrances. None of this is unique here. And while Hai Phong is a legitimately important city with a seriously underrated industrial and commercial economic significance, the importance of the weekend getaway economy can't be ignored either. And while we chose to focus on that silly joke of the affair economy, there is also a lot of legitimate family tourism throughout the area. The aforementioned seafood, beach visits to Do Sun to bring the kids to, easy access to Ha Long Bay and Cat Ba Island. So while the businesses of Hai Phong will welcome their Hanoian customers with open arms, there is the reality that Hai Phong is a city of serious historical dignity, a bastion of defense, and the port that fed and armed the revolution. Being reduced to a place where people go from the capital to misbehave, well, it's easy to see why people would find this irritating. The reality is that Hai Phong is an incredible city with an amazing past, interesting present, and an even more exciting future. Even though it doesn't show up on most travel itineraries for foreigners, maybe it should. It's a really cool place. Well, with that, we're out. Until the next time, bye-bye.